Cool. All right. Last week we covered systems fundamentals, setting up your environment, running simple shell commands, shell scripts, installing brew casks, getting you set up and ready to go to develop and operate. We SSH'd onto EC2s on Saturday, and we got to run some commands that we would run locally on a remote server. We're going to step back to working locally. We'll we'll go back to EC2s by the end of the week, and we'll continue to introduce fundamentals at the start of these early weeks and take that from local to remote. That's the pattern that we're trying to create here. Today, our topic is going to be data. Well, I should say this entire week, our topic is going to be data. So starting with CSVs today, CSVs essentially being the most rudimentary form of data storage. We are going to also use this as an opportunity to write some simple Python scripts and to work inside of a Python terminal. So you all should have Python installed from last week. If you don't, or if you didn't get yours working for any reason, try to get that done as soon as possible so you could follow along with the lab. Okay. Why are we going to learn Python? Well, Python's still a very popular language, and we it's particularly useful for later on when we start to play with SageMaker, because SageMaker essentially is just AWS, Amazon's utilization of Jupyter notebooks, right? And Jupyter notebooks utilize Python files. If you haven't used Jupyter notebooks yet, you'll get to experience that later on in the course. It's pretty cool how it allows you to run code inline, and more on that later. For now, we are going to start off very slow. We're going to talk about some of Python's quirks, like how its syntax requires you to be mindful of your indentation, how in Python, which is an object-oriented programming language, we have this concept of encapsulation. And does anyone want to take a stab at describing or defining what encapsulation is?
It's bundling data along with the functions that can execute that same data.
What was that first part?
Bundling, put in it's essentially since it's related to the concept of object oriented programming. Essentially, what we're doing in the encapsulation is that you're bundling both the data and the methods or functions that can execute that data into one single object.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. Let's hear it in some other words as well. Jael, what about you? How would you define encapsulation? You're muted if you're speaking. Or maybe she stepped away. All right, let's see. Jesse, what about you?
Damn, you just put me on a spot like that. Yeah, encapsulation is a way that we are going to package data, and we're going to package it in a way that makes it easy to pick it up and move it somewhere else, because
Yes.
that's what we're really trying to get to.
Yes. Yep. So far, both definitions are pretty spot on. I suppose the one thing I want to add is the concept of instantiation, right? With encapsulation, we're able to essentially create a blueprint, which in this case is called a class. And with that blueprint, we could repeatedly recreate or instantiate an instance of that package or bundle in your guys' words. So we'll demo this through a few different scripts. We will then write a simple program inside of the Python terminal. And from there, you'll just jump into your challenges for the day. Okay. Open up your terminals and your code editors. Make a fresh project. And we are going to begin by creating a virtual environment. Let me open up mine. Let me start fresh. So I'm going to go up one directory. I'm going to make another project so you all can do this from scratch along with me. Missing my dir. Good thing I have my handy dandy Zeesh syntax highlighting. And whoops, I meant to add this. And I'm going to cd into that directory. Okay. So someone tell me, how do I create a virtual environment?
Python space -m space, yep, that right there. VENV and then name it whatever you want.
Right on. What is the -m?
I'm guessing means make. Tell me I'm wrong.
Okay. Well, let's find out. Mod. So it's short for module, running a library module as a script. But make is actually also a very good way of remembering it, right? As long as you remember what the command is, keep that handy because you'll generally want to create a virtual environment. The reason being, it allows you to separate out any libraries that you don't need and allows you to contain any additional libraries that you might use that you might not want installed globally or in your other projects. So I'm going to make this, and actually just to show, to demonstrate what Nick was saying about the last thing being a name, because sometimes students get confused about VNV being there twice. This first part is the module that we're calling, and the second is the argument we're passing in. I used a dot, so we know that it's hidden. So if we use -a with our ls, we can see it. Now, to activate it, I'll need to use source, which we've already seen a few times this past week. In this instance, I would be passing in a path to this directory called activate. And once I do that, my terminal will confirm for me that it's been activated with something like this. Cool. So what do we want? Well, we are going to be working with CSVs. Let's go ahead and take a look at this lab. We set up our environment. We need to mock data. So an earlier version of this lab had us provided a CSV for us, but I decided to take that out so we can create our own CSV, right? Now we could do it the old-fashioned boring way by just making a CSV and typing out some data, but let's try something a little more fun. So let's ask an AI model to create a script for us to make a CSV. So I'm going to do Olama run Mistral. You can use any model you want. I'm going to ask it, write a Python script for me that will generate a CSV file with random mock data. All right. So it's telling me it's got, wow, it's doing a bit more than it did before, which is nice. And let's see if it knows what it's talking about. So I'm going to grab all of this. I'm going to make a directory, or sorry, a file called make, or just mock data. And I'm going to paste all that in. Now, notice here at the very top, we are importing some packages. These are packages, and basically similar to how we were using Brew to unpackage some casks and install them, and similar to how we were using Yum and apt on the EC2 on Saturday to install packages, we can use pip to install packages because that is the Python package management tool, or default, I should say. Pip install Baker is going to be one of the ones we want. Basically, we'll want to install everything up here unless it's already built in. We shouldn't need to install random, for example. Could be wrong. All right, so we're installing Faker. Now, this is also letting me know that it recognizes I am inside of my virtual environment, which is good. And my version of pip in this virtual environment is outdated. So generally, for a project, you will want to run this pip install to upgrade your package manager inside of your project. It really doesn't matter right now because we're just making a very simple set of scripts. But let's see what this looks like, and let's see how fast it goes. See, it took like a second. So generally, to get the muscle memory in there, whenever you see that message, go ahead and upgrade pip. All right. Now that we've got Faker, we need pandas. So I'm going to do a pip install pandas. All right. How's everyone doing? Is everyone pretty much more or less where I'm at? Cool, cool.
Not even close, man.
Not even close?
Yeah, I type in Python to do that MVNV, and then it just tells me Python that the CSH command not found.
CSH command?
Try Python 3. It sounds like your alias might not be set up.
Okay. Okay, yeah, it takes Python 3.
Cool.
Okay.
We'll set up an alias for you.
Okay.
Okay. Right. And everybody that needs to step through anything else from last week, hit up Mike, me, and Kim, create a request through the student help request channel. That makes it easier for us to track and stay on top of and not forget. And we will try to get through as much of the setup from last week later on today. Okay. We've installed pandas, we've installed Faker. We should now be able to run this script. So let's first just read through it, see if it even makes sense. Mistral provided us some comments, so we're not entirely lost. Here, we're seeing, actually, So somebody tell me what's happening in line 6.
You're instantiating an instance of Faker, class Faker.
Exactly. We are instantiating Faker, and we are assigning it to a variable called fake. Now, in line 9, whoa, I don't think we want 1,000 rows. Let's just tune that back to maybe 20, because we don't need to play with that much data. And yeah, let's use these columns. That's fine. Create a data frame with random data. Okay. I am not. Okay. Interesting. Yes. I'm very curious to see how this is going to look. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. So if you don't have your alias set up, you'll have to use Python 3, like Nick pointed out. If you do have it set up, then you can just use Python because it's essentially saying Python 3 because of the alias. And we are going to run this script, montdata.py. And it looks like I was thinking pretty hard there for a sec. Let's see. We have a random data.csv. Let's take a look at that. Nice. Okay. So there's really nothing fancy about this at all. It kind of went above and beyond creating a class for all this data, but hey, that's actually maybe best practice, right? In the README, I do believe we did provide an example. And if you haven't noticed yet, these READMEs sometimes have these expandable sections, right? So it's, I guess, not very pretty inside of the VS Code preview, which, by the way, you can give additional styling if you wanted to. But if we look at this, basically, it just tells us the steps that we've just run through, right? We can use an Olama model to generate a script. This is the script that I had it create earlier, a lot simpler. Notice that we're not even creating a class yet, but the end result is the same. Okay. So now we should go back to Python fundamentals. Let's go back to our preview. Let's see where are we at now. Okay, we could collapse that. We don't need it anymore. Already done that. Or I guess I expanded it. We did. We haven't done this yet, have we? Okay, yeah, I think this is where we need to, this is where we need to be. Generate CSV.py, CSV reader v1. Oh, this numbering is confusing. Okay. Yes. We've created our random data. So now we can create a Python script to interact with that data, right? We're going to make a CSV reader. Let's call it, what does it tell us to call it? Could have sworn there was a name here somewhere. Oh, here, Python PyCSV dash v1. So Python, or Py, I should say, CSV dash v1.py. In this file, we are going to import the CSV package. We are going to set a CSV path, and let's just use whatever is in here. I'm going to just rename this random data to baked data. So I can just continue to use that. Oof, giving me way too much. Now I'm going to say with open, I'm going to pass in these arguments, CSV path, new line equals blank s CSV file. So let's read a bit about open. We're going to be working a lot with, a wide range of tools and platforms, and our emphasis is going to be mostly on operations, right? So when it comes to scripting and coding, we'll provide a lot of resources for you, but we also expect you to start to build up experience and comfort prompting GPTs to create things for you. And we also want to encourage that as you do that, don't just accept anything it gives you blindly, right? Because that's eventually going to bite you in the ass, right? What you want to do is you want to most effectively use generative AI is to be more skilled, I suppose, or be more knowledgeable than the AI itself, right? Because at the end of the day, the AI is nothing more than a guessing machine, a prediction model. So read a lot of documentation. If you haven't heard that before, some engineers tell you software engineering is 10% writing code, 90% reading documentation. And that holds true as well in DevOps. Okay, so open. This is a function that opens a file, it returns a stream, and it accepts these arguments. So we definitely need to pass in a file path. So that's what we're doing. We need to pass in a mode. Notice how there's an equal sign here. That means that this parameter is optional because there is a default value. So if we don't pass anything in for mode, it's by default going to use R, which you can infer stands for read. Buffering, encoding, all of that is the same. All of those have default values. So we really don't need to change any of this. We will change new line, however, because we're working with CSVs. And CSVs essentially work by having two delimiters, delimiter being the entity, the character, the symbol that separates a cell from another cell, a value from another value. I mean, somebody tell me, like, what does CSV even stand for?
Comma separated values.
Exactly. And this is why I said at the start of this that CSVs are essentially the most rudimentary form of data storage. Like it's even in the name, it's just describing itself, right? Okay, so yes, we want to pass in an empty string as the new line because we're working with CSVs. And now let's go ahead and finish the rest of this. We are going to instantiate a dictionary reader, which is going to accept a CSV file. I can't type today, apparently. And we're going to say data equals row for row in reader, which is just Python syntax for looping. So it's going to iterate through all the data that we pass in through the CSV. And for every iteration of this loop, we are going to print an entry. So for entry in data, print entry. Simple enough, right? So let's go ahead and run this. Python py-csv-v1.py. All right, it prints out our CSV. Okay. Let's do another version that's a little more advanced. So we're going to make another file called py-csv v2.py. And I don't know why I said make dir. I'm making a file, so I'm going to use code. And this is going to import CSV again. But this time, instead of just writing some code in line, we're going to go ahead and create a class, debating whether or not I want to just hit tab. Sure, why not? Just going to accept the recommendation, the suggestion here. Let's read through this. We're initializing this CSV reader, right? Can anyone tell me what this is?
Dunder init. It's like the default parameters, variables, function that you can set within a class.
Exactly. So for those of you that aren't familiar with this syntax at all, Patrick called it a dunder init because what we have outside of the word init are two underscores. So dunder is essentially slang for double underscore. And in Python, dunder methods are essentially magic methods. There's like, you could use a dunder len, len for length, dunder string for string. And these are the methods that are built in and instantiated when you call init, right? So I think there's an example here. Yes. So for example, if you were to write print len hello, it's essentially just an easier and more human readable way of typing out hello dot len, dunder len to be precise. What's happening here is this is a string that's created inside of Python, and this string will have built-in methods such as length, which will allow you, when it's run, to retrieve the number of characters that the string contains. So that's really all that is. It seems to throw some folks off when they're new to Python, but you'll get used to it eventually. What we're doing here, though, more importantly, is we are initializing this class and we are passing in some important information, right? Self is essentially a magical keyword that allows it to reference itself. And that way, the file path that we pass in can be associated with the class that's instantiated, right? Because there's going to be a difference between something that belongs to the class itself versus something that belongs to the instance of the class, right? So these following that would be these additional methods. We could write load data, passing in self again, so that we're calling all of these functions on this instance and not trying to modify the original class in any way. And we are going to use that open again, just like we did last time, but now within this method. And just like in V1, we're going to iterate through all of that data, and then we're going to print each iteration. But so let's see what happens if I try to run this. If I try to run this, nothing happens. I don't get the same results that I did before. Why?
Because you just created a class in that file. It's not actually executing.
Exactly.
anything. Cool.
Exactly. Now, if I were to add the class down here, like CSV reader equals CSV reader, then it would be the same thing, basically. It would create the class, but nothing will happen. Or it would create an instance of the class and nothing would happen. So I still have to deliberately call the methods that I want it to run. So I still need to call load data. I still need to call print data. Now, the advantage to this over V1 is in its modularity. I may not need the functionality of the entire thing all the time. Maybe I just need to load the data. I don't really care about printing it because printing it will flood my terminal and that's not what I want. And it can be executed in another way, right? So first, let's run this just to see that it does its thing. But let's also open up a Python terminal. So now we're inside of a terminal within a terminal. We're inside of a Python terminal running on our Linux or Unix machine, Unix-based machine. And now I can do something like import CSV. Whoops, I could spell. And I could also import from this file. Here's somewhere else that we might get tripped up if we don't know ahead of time what we're doing. I have to import this CSV reader in order to be able to use it, right? So if I say from py-csv-v2 import CSV reader, it's going to complain. It's going to complain because it doesn't like dashes in the name. So I have to rename this file to use underscores instead, just to make the interpreter happy. So let's do that. Let's go back to our terminal. Let's try again. We're going to import CSV. Actually, what am I doing? I don't need to import CSV. I just need to import CSV reader, right? CSV reader. I'm going to put my from in front. From py_csv_v2 import CSV reader. Okay, cool. It did all that. I didn't want it to do all that. So let's comment that out. Let's try again. Oh, why does it keep doing that? Okay, so I'm going to re-import it. Oh no, I've saved the wrong one. Saved the one with the dashes. So be very mindful of working with a file after you've renamed it. In this case, I need to open the correct file and I need to modify that. Now, if I go to Python and I call this again, it does not run automatically because I commented out these lines. If you don't know already, command / will comment/uncomment. Super handy. Much faster than manually going through line by line, adding these hashes. And different languages have different ways of commenting. Okay. Right. So I've imported this. So now what we could do is we can call it just the way we did before. We're going to make a CSV reader. We're going to call it a CSV reader. And we're going to pass in that exact same data. Notice how I'm only passing in the file, right? I'm not passing in self. I don't need to. That's partly how that magical self works. It doesn't need to be. It's like it's implicitly known that it's going to be used, right? So I really only have to pass in the file path. Now I hit enter. Now that it's been initialized, I can call its methods individually, one at a time. Whoops.
Think when you were instantiating, you said fake data with no file extension.
Good catch. Let's see. So I'm gonna have to type that again because this terminal is getting really weird. All right, cool. Now, if I run load data, it looks really weird, but I'm sure it'll be fine. It says the data has been loaded, and I could also read the data or print the data, which is what I named the method. So print data and prints the data. Cool. Easy peasy, right? That is just about it for this first lab. We discussed Python syntax. We discussed the concept of encapsulation. We've set up a very simple project with a virtual environment. We made our own CSV file, and we demonstrated how to run a simple script and how to run a slightly less simple version of that script by utilizing classes. Now let's do one more thing. Let's write to a CSV file. So now I want to actually import CSV because we're just going to do this from the terminal. We don't need to write another script for this. Let's go to our next lesson. Here, this is where we maybe talk a bit more about where we're going with this content, right? If this week is about databases, then why are we talking about CSVs all day? Again, because we want you to think about CSVs as being a very rudimentary form of data storage. Fun fact, whenever I taught this lesson before, I'd go on like a 20-minute rabbit hole, down a rabbit hole just about the history of CSV. And I'm sparing all of you that rabbit hole this time around. The key thing to know, though, about CSVs is what I mentioned earlier about having two delimiters, one being the comma, the other being the new line. When you start to work with CSVs in scripts, in code, be mindful of how different interpreters will interpret that data, right? Because in a CSV, something like this might be different from something like this, depending on how the interpreter reads it, right? Same with anything that has like quotations. And then what happens if you have a value that actually is or requires a comma? Like, let's say we do this last name, first name, Pierce David. If we pass it in like this, an interpreter is going to consider these two separate values, and that may not be what we want. So we would have to wrap that into double quotes so our interpreter doesn't get tripped up, so that we're very deliberate about the intention that we are setting. Okay. Back to this. Oh,
Julia, so is the bottom line there validate your data import once you've created your ingest script?
that's definitely a very good step. Best practice. Always validate.
Okay, thanks.
That's actually something that I was working on at the end of last quarter for one of our internal tools, building out some validations that could support really large CSVs, like with what, 50,000 plus rows, I believe. Yes, anyway, validation, that's super important. Muy importante. Okay. Where are we? We are I guess we're making another CSV file. You can, or you could just use the same CSV file that you've been using. I'm just going to use the same CSV file I've been using. I've imported CSV. I'm going to use that with open again, and I'm going to pass in that CSV fake data as a CSV file. Now, remember what I said about Python being very picky about indentations. You need to respect the indentations, or else Python interpreter will not respect you. All right, so CSV file indent for row in CSV reader. Now, two indents, and I'll hit enter one more time, and voila, it prints out all of these values. Now, let's go back to what we were hovering over earlier when we were learning about what open is. Remember how we talked about there being a mode and its default value is R? Well, we don't have to use that R because sometimes we don't just want to read. Sometimes we want to be able to write data, right? So instead of using R, we're going to use W. And something else that I said earlier was essentially read documentation, be prepared to read documentation. I could use Google to give me some docs on CSV, and it will give me some information on that package and how to utilize it. I could also just ask within my terminal. I'm going to ask Mistral, let's see, for Python package CSV, what modes can I use? And looks like it looks like yeah, it looks like it's knows what it's talking about. Simple enough. Okay, so it's giving me a lot of information, but yes, basically you use these resources, take notes, copy paste your notes. That's also very handy. A very handy habit to build. Now we're going to write to a CSV. So I've already imported. I don't need to import again with NFL, sorry, with fake data.csv. Mode will now be W, and we are just going to keep using CSV file. CSV writer equals CSV.writer, CSV file, CSV writer dot write row. Let's see, what did our data look like? I already forget. We had names, an address, phone number, email. Okay, so not being very creative here. I'm just going to use my name. I'm going to say 123 Main Street. And what do I want? Email, phone number, email. 123 456 7 me at gmail.com. Okay, so let's see. Will this work? It did not work because I have bad syntax. Looks like I'm missing, or I used the wrong parenthesis. Also, doesn't like the indentation. I might have to start over. So I could do something like this just to make it a little easier on myself. Copy this. going to replace this with fake data. Fake data. CSV file. And what did I have earlier? Just going to copy all of that. So notice I used the single quotes. Absolutely not necessary in this case, but also often if part of making these kind of decisions boils down to knowing the context that you're working in, right? So if I knew that the tools I was working with require strings, then there shouldn't be an issue passing in the single quotations. Now, if I didn't know what kind of system or tool that I'm working with, it can throw a curveball at me. It might actually read this single quotation as being a part of the string, which is not what I want. So just be mindful, always validate. All right, let's copy. Let's clear all of this out. I'm gonna actually just go ahead, do a Control C, interrupt that whole entry, and I'm just gonna start fresh. I definitely don't want one line. I'm gonna hit enter. I'm gonna hit enter again. And let's see. Now it complained about something else. What did it complain about this time with OpenCSV? Okay, so CSV exists. It's already been imported, so that's not it. CSV.writer.
Is it the telephone number? The dash is not being numbers or something?
Oh, maybe, right? Maybe. Let's find out. It's always worth a shot, right? What's the worst that can happen? Okay, so it still doesn't like it. I don't quite see what it's complaining about. It's probably something really,
It's closed file. Does that have to do with the context? This isn't with open a context manager.
yes, maybe. So let's continue looking at this.
I wasn't following like where you're at in your Python
Mhm.
terminal, if it considers the file is open or if it's actually closed.
I think it should recognize it as closing, because it gives me that final new line, right? If I were to paste this again and I hit enter, I get to paste in a final enter to close it off, but I'm not sure what's going on. So let me go ahead and just ask my other terminal, what's going on here? The issue is I'm assigning the name fake data to both the open file and the CSV writer object. This causes the original file handle to be closed immediately. Ah, okay. So it doesn't like that I'm using this. If we follow the example here, as right, right, it's in the example using a different name. So I'm not going to use fake data. I'm going to say fake file instead. And that should fix it, hopefully.
I,
What was that?
on the third line,
Mm-hmm.
the very end, it says CSV.writer CSV underscore file. Wouldn't that need to be fake file?
Yes. Let's update that to fake file. Good catch. And let's try it again. Third time's a charm, right? Nice. It looks like it gave out a number. This terminal syntax is really wonky, but if we go to our CSV, let's just exit out of this. I'm fed up with that terminal and open up our fake data. It overwrote all of that data with my single row, which might not be what I wanted. So what we would do in this case is instead of using W, we would use A, which is to append, I believe. Okay. If I had paid more attention to what Mistral was telling me earlier, then I may have been able to not delete all of my data. So lesson learned, right? Okay. That is about it for the lab. The challenges are fairly straightforward. We're going to have you, let's see here, do a word guess and a JSON CSV. So I believe this was mentioned last week, but there are going to be times where the challenge is going to be inside of the repository, the curriculum repository, to be clear. And there are going to be other times where it's going to link to an external repository. So when it links to an external repository, notice, for example, the address here is Platoon DevOps. It's an entirely different org. It has its own structure versus JSON to CSV, which exists inside of the curriculum. You don't need to make pull requests for the challenges that are inside the repo, but we encourage you to make pull requests for anything that's outside of that. So anything that's inside of Platoon DevOps, go ahead, fork it down, make a pull request when you are done with the challenge, and we'll be able to review it through your pull request. Any questions?
So the second exercise or challenge, just do it, but we're not turning it in the same way that we do the first one, correct?
Exactly, yes. Cool. All right.
Okay.
We've been here for about an hour. Let's go ahead and take a 15 to 20-minute break. I will open up breakout rooms and me, Kim, and Mike will help anyone that's blocked and needs to run through anything else from last week. So let me cut off the recording.